Hi everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Dylan Brown and I'm a registered nurse. I graduated from St. Francis Xavier in 2012, and I'd like to thank you once again for coming to this workshop on evidence-based practice as a registered nurse, and I'm very thankful to have the chance to speak to you about this. So my experience is at the Halifax Infirmary, where I worked after I graduated from St. FX. And I did some research through the perioperative nursing program that I had to take on perioperative hypothermia, and I decided to try to implement some changes to our preoperative routine to better reflect the standard of practice that I learned about. And I encountered a number of resistances or barriers to that along the way, and I'll tell you about those today. So the first one that I'd like to talk about is a distinct lack of knowledge on the real standards of practice rather than the established routine in the workplace. There was a very much acceptance of the routines and not a lot of questioning of the routines in my workplace. So thus there was no knowledge of something better. And that was on the part of the registered nurse, the licensed practical nurse, and the surgery team. Not so much the anesthesiologist in this case. They knew quite a bit about that scenario. But that was the first major barrier that I encountered. The second major barrier that I had in implementing this practice to our preoperative routine was a lack of role clarity on the part of the nursing staff, the anesthesiologist, and the surgeon. And what I mean by that, particularly for the registered nurse, is that they didn't really see themselves as someone who was able to review the research and recommend practices. They felt that the quote-unquote boss of the situation would be the surgeon or the anesthesiologist, when in fact the registered nurse is a professional and they are trained in the review of research, and thus they have the skills to review and recommend practices. So that was a big part of that. But the second part of the lack of role clarity that I spoke of before was that there are a number of tasks that need to be performed in between the patient coming into the operating room and the commencement of the surgery. But those tasks seem to be quite distinctly divided into the registered nurse's tasks, the anesthesiologist's tasks, and the surgeon's tasks. So we kind of work in parallel beside one another rather than as a distinct collaborative unit. So that was kind of a major problem for me, because I couldn't really, get us to work together and to think together about solutions to the problems that we were having with perioperative hypothermia. So those were my two biggest problems with that, and I did have some success, but mostly those barriers turned out to be too much to overcome in most cases. So I can offer a little bit of advice to registered nurses who do want to change practice in their setting and want to implement the evidence-based, the gold standard practice that's out there right now. And the first thing that I would say is, particularly if you are a new nurse like I was when I tried to do this, you need to gather as much information about the situation as possible. And that's not just reviewing as much research. You need to do that too, but you need to go back to your practice setting before you try to change things up, and you need to learn about why things are the way they are in your practice setting. You need to know the rationale for the current practice, and you need to know all the obstacles you might have to overcome in changing that practice. So that's the first major step. The second step you do when you actually approach your colleagues or your managers is you need to take a systems approach to change. You need to come up with solutions or work with your colleagues to find solutions that benefit not only patient by patient, but benefit the system and make it more efficient in the long term. So those are my two big points of advice. I'd like to thank you all for having me today. It was a pleasure, and happy X-Ring.